But enough of that. There were some awesome times to follow. Way more good than bad. Getting to watch this kid's relentless spirit and patient persistence just amazed me. How she could so purpose to do something or be something and never let anything get in her way or cause her to get frustrated when it wasn't going the way she wanted. Her ability to be patient and continue to persist for something without getting frustrated is amazing to me. She completely defied the doctor's orders and predictions. And we were blessed with a tremendous amount of wonderful teachers and therapists and aides, caseworkers. I will say something about Mesa County's caseworkers. They have some good people that really care about the special needs community, and we were in good hands all around. I have here Grandpa's girl. Do you want to talk about that? She's not gonna. Christy's dad was a rough, no nonsense Korean vet, old school, and he was just outwardly a very rough individual. But to watch this giant of a man just melt with Kassidie in his arms was amazing to watch. She had him wrapped around her little finger, and she loved him. She loved his deep, gruff voice. She loved to lay in his arms, and she would hum in pitch with his deep baritone hum. And watching his heart and watching him express love with her when he couldn't do it with anyone else was definitely a God thing. Definitely a God thing. Sometimes Kassidie would lay in her room, stare at the ceiling, and laugh uncontrollably, like gut laugh. And the only thing we can conclude is her angel is tickling her feet. I truly think she has a special connection with God and his angels. Her wit, her charm, her eyes that can say so much and pierce through your soul, her ability to communicate so wonderfully without any words amazes me still to this day. She is a phenomenal communicator for someone who has no vocabulary. And then there's just lots of fun stories. I mean, we could tell hundreds of them, but a couple that stand out. In middle school, she was in a special needs program, mostly higher functioning, but by this time she's walking. And she would get her teacher's chair, and it was one of those roller desk chairs, plant her elbows in the seat and use it like a walker and take off, and she would get out of the classroom and go down the hall, crashing into the lockers, bouncing off of them like a ping pong ball, laughing the whole way because she got out of the classroom. That teacher got calls from the office several times saying, "Mrs. So-and-so, can you come get Kassidie? She's down here at the office again." She knew where the nurse's station was, and she knew where they kept the children's Tylenol. She'd escape out of class when she wasn't feeling good. She'd go stand in front of the cabinet where the ibuprofen or the children's Tylenol was. So this kid knows some stuff. One time we were four-wheeling and Christy was on her four-wheeler and Cassie was sitting on the back. In fact, there'll be a picture of her in here. And we were riding on a fairly tame road, nothing exciting. And after about 20 minutes of this, Kassidie unbuckled her helmet, took it off, and draped it over Christy's shoulder. And she had never done that before. And so we all pulled over, like, what is this all about? We couldn't figure it out. We looked in the helmet, nothing was poking her, her head looked okay, she seemed happy, what's going on? And finally, and I think this is where God just helps us understand her thought process. But it was as if she's saying, look, if we're just going to do this tame stuff, I don't need a helmet. So let's liven it up. So we put the helmet back on her. We found a rougher road with some creek crossings, and we did some real four-wheeling. And that kid laughed and giggled the whole way and kept the helmet on the whole time. This is just last week. Like I said, we're doing some remodeling in her room. Her room is her sanctuary. It is her place to hang out. She can hang out in there for hours and hours playing with her toys. But I needed her out of her room for a little while. I did some demolition work. And so we have a spare room right now that doesn't have any furniture in it because it's going to get painted. And so I took some of her toys and I put her in this spare room. I thought, okay, she's got her toys. There's no furniture. She can't get into anything. So I went back to work and I came back in a few minutes to check on her. And she's laying on the ground on her back playing with two of these Hallmark Christmas time snowmen that play musical songs when you push their hands. I didn't know it, but Christy had hidden them up in the closet because Kassidie will play them to ad nauseum. We will go through 100 batteries while listening to Jingle Bells. And she's on the ground playing with these snowmen. And I looked at the closet because there were still a couple more up there. The shelf's over my head. And I was, Kassidie, how did you do this? I don't understand. How did you do this? And she just started laughing at me. Just like, I'm not telling you how I did this. Christy and I tried to get her to recreate it. I put them back on the shelf and I tried to get her to show me how she did it. And she would half-heartedly kind of reach up there and turn around and laugh. And so it's just this, she's like Mr. Magoo, where he can walk along the skyscraper beams and never fall, and you think it's all dumb luck, but there's just something mysterious going on. So we have so many stories like that, where no one but her and God know the truth. She is who she is. She does not conform to society, and I love that about her. I wish I was more like her in that regard. And we have been so blessed. Sometimes embarrassingly so. It's just like, God, I don't understand this. Why do you keep blessing us so much? And I've come to realize, I think it has more to do with Kassidie. We're just the benefactors because we're in close proximity, is the best way I can put it. His blessing on her and the way it flows to other people, the way it has flowed to her caregivers, her bus drivers, her therapists, her house sitters. It's just anybody that has taken any time at all to get to know Kassidie has been blessed by her. And that's just, I think that's God's way of using her as a conduit for his love. I'm wrapping it up. You don't want to jump in? Okay. So I was trying to think of what are some things we've learned that could apply for all of us today. And I think the first one is God is truly so faithful. We went through some very, very difficult times, and God was always faithful. And looking back, I see it even more clearly now how faithful he was. And I think as we think about what our future looks like and the uncertainty of our own times, it's important to remember that that's no different than any other difficult time that we've been through. God will be faithful. We just need to be faithful to Him in the process. Another thing that I've learned from Kassidie that I think is truly a teachable moment for all of us, Kassidie lives in the moment. She does not worry about tomorrow. She doesn't fret about what happened yesterday. She just lives in the moment. And I think, well, I know, God wants us to be the same way. Jesus said, why do you worry about tomorrow? You cannot add 1 hour of your life by worrying. God already knows what you need before you ask, so don't worry. And that is Kassidie to a T. And I think it's something we could all learn from her, is to be in the moment and not worry about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or in the next 4 years. Because when we do that, we rob ourselves of being in God's presence in the here and now. Because this is where He is now. And this is where He wants us to be. And Kassidie's got that figured out. Another thing that I've learned, and this goes back to those folks that seemed really, really troubled for us when we were at peace. And I think that it's because God promises a peace that transcends all understanding, but He does not grant that peace when you are trying to forecast yourself into the future and play what-if scenarios. God does not show up there. That peace will only show up when and if that thing happens and you're in it. And Christy and I were in it, and His peace showed up for us when we needed it. And looking from the outside and people trying to put themselves in our shoes, I think we're distraught because they didn't have that peace, because it wasn't there. They didn't need it. We needed it. And so I think the lesson here is it does not do us any good to forecast into the future and start playing what-if scenarios with, what am I going to do if this happens? Well, what if the country goes this way? Or what if... All you're going to do is rob yourself of peace, because God's peace doesn't work that way. God's peace will be there when you need it, if and when the storm hits. So that's my lesson, and my takeaway from that is that Jesus says, I give you peace, not of the world, but of me. But it will be when we need it. In the meantime, there is a secondary peace, and that's just a peace knowing, okay, if we ever get there, God's got it. But to try and forecast ahead of time, you're just going to rob yourself of any real peace. And then going back to some Christians that didn't quite know how to put Kassidie into their little Bible pigeonhole and were making wrong assumptions about her. I think God just uses people like Kassidie to illustrate that He will never be confined to our doctrinal dogma rules. And we can try and know the Scriptures as best we can, but ultimate truth is still a living being, Jesus Christ, and that is a relational truth that is between you and your Savior. And there are just some things you're not going to know or understand until God's ready to reveal them. And Kassidie is a mystery, and one day we will know what His plan was. For us now, it's just to have faith that He knit her together the way He wanted, and it was for His good pleasure, and that's good enough for me. And then the last one, and we'll close with questions, and this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's still relevant today. Living with an overabundance of caution is not necessarily living. The doctors tried so hard to make sure nothing bad could happen to Kassidie that she couldn't even really eat. And I think we live in a time where fear of the unknown causes the experts to tell us to live in such a way that if we're not careful, we stop living. So take that for what it's worth. That's Kassidie's story. We'll answer any questions. If anybody has any questions, we'll do our best. But yeah, that has been the blessed walk with the Lord as the parents of Kassidie.